This is the Royal Enfield Guerrilla 450. It represents a big departure for the Indian brand in that it's modern, liquid-cooled, and comes in some pretty splashy colors. And the best part, it represents pretty good value for money, and it's wrapped up in a modern-looking package that nearly anyone could enjoy. But it does beg the question, is this bike really ready to take on the best from the European and Japanese manufacturers? I'm gonna get this motorcycle out on the road and back in the studio to give you a comprehensive look on whether or not this bike is a big hit or just a flop. Now, I purchased this motorcycle using my own funds, and it's a giveaway bike on yamanoob.co, but there is a twist. This is just a 3-day giveaway. That's right, you got today, tomorrow, and the next day to get entered to win this bike plus $1,200 cash. We wanted to do something fun for the riding season, something for the beginners, something that's kind of a beginner rider package, so you can go do your MSF, get some gear, pay off your taxes, whatever you want to do. Hit the link down below and don't miss your chance to get entered to win. Okay, let's swing a leg and go for a ride. All right, boys, swinging a leg over the Guerrilla 450. It's a handsome looking little thing for $52.99 MSRP. Nice, beautiful blue subframe, chunky ADV derived frame. That Sherpa 450. A lot to like here, you know, for all those who think that new motorcycles look weird and bad and they want something classic. Well, here you go. Royal Enfield is giving it to you straight and simple. So sitting aboard the motorcycle, pretty short seat height. First thing I noticed, I have a very pronounced bend in my leg. I'm about 5'11" with a 32-inch inseam. Can very comfortably flat foot this machine. And I reach to the bars and I notice nice chunky grips. These feel like Harley grips. And then the levers are nice and thick too. It feels like all the touch points they really thought about. Flicking the TFT here to life, this beautiful round unit that, you know, most people would just slap on a square display, a rectangular display, not Royal Enfield. Got this unique little switch cluster here. I'll go ahead and fire her up. A little 452, I believe, cc. Sherpa 452. Sherpa 450. Fires to life. 4-valve, liquid cooled. We'll rev her up a little bit. Not a sound you're used to if you know Royal Enfields of old, but this is actually an over square motor. There's a lot of technical stuff here that I'm going to go over in the shop, but right now we're just talking about how that translates to the road. And pulling away here, nice light engagement to the clutch, snicking up through the gearbox. It's got a really tractable low-end amount of grunt. And the first thing you notice is the ADV bones of this bike, that long wheelbase, that stable feeling, that low center of gravity. That's a pretty unique vibe over what you normally find in the beginner bike segment. You know, the Speed 400, this bike's main competitor, is kind of a diminutive little thing. It's kind of a pint-sized motorcycle. The Guerrilla 450 feels substantial. It feels kind of big, to be honest, for what it is. So braking performance is powered by this bi-Bree caliper, single disc, dual piston. Bi-Bree stands for bi Brembo. That's a pretty common braking setup if you're used to Indian motorcycles. You see them on KTMs. I think you see them on that Aprilia RS 457 too. Down into the brakes here, this nice little switchback here. And the motor, I gotta tell you, it can definitely rev out a little bit, but you really sense those ADV bones when you just kind of rap. You get that bike low in the RPMs and it just has that big honking induction sound. It just wants to brap on the low end. But here's what really stands out. Check out the speed bump. Like it's nothing. So this bike with its chunkier ADV derived frame, its scramblery tires, its slightly elevated suspension travel over the competitors, the longer wheelbase, this is an incredibly sure-footed motorcycle, and that gives you a lot of confidence as a beginner rider. You know, if you're coming at this, it's your first motorcycle, I think this does a great job of not hand-holding you too much, you know. Bikes like a Grom or an MT-03, they're a little too pint-sized in my opinion for the vast majority of, you know, larger adult male riders. Now this thing is awesome though, as we bleed out the clutch there, because I didn't want to bonsai through the intersection without really knowing what was happening. Picking up the pace a little bit, getting up the revs. I believe 8250 is our RPM limit on this machine. Zipping it into this nice sweeper here, and you just notice that longer wheelbase. It's super stable. So buzzing up to 60 miles per hour on this 2-lane highway style road here, and you know, kind of like a Ducati Scrambler or a Sparkpillin or something like that. You know, this motorcycle's happy spot cruising is about 65. It can absolutely go sort of 80, 85 miles an hour, but you don't want to sustain those speeds with this motorcycle because it starts to get a bit buzzy in the handlebars and through the foot pegs, and you actually feel it in the gas tank a little bit too. This bike has excellent low and mid-range grunt and torque characteristics. Royal Enfield has actually mapped this thing such that you get a lot of that peak power and torque nice and low in the rev range. And so I kind of find, you know, staying one gear higher than you would normally stay is this bike's sweet spot. You know, when you're attacking twisties and cruising around, I think keeping it sort of between 3,000 and 5,000 RPM, you get this really nice little snarly, honky kind of induction noise, and that's really where the kind of sweet spot of the bike. But you have enough performance over rev to where if you need to rev it out a little bit, get it up to speed, you totally can. Let's see about a little filtering action here. The Enfield is nice and narrow, so it has no problems doing those sorts of things. Single cylinder, and despite having this kind of flat tracker gas tank and the more scramblery style bars, it's a very narrow motorcycle, very easy to handle. You can filter through traffic very nicely with this thing, and grabbing downshifts is also a pleasure. Cable actuated clutch, as you guys can see here, ride-by-wire system. You blip the two, and gearbox snicks nice and down into gear. Feels very Japanese in its execution, which is very high praise. What's kind of neat about Royal Enfields to me is that they're not really that derivative of motorcycles. I find that a lot of, you know, CF Motos, some of the European stuff, you know, everybody's copying everybody else. It's like there's kind of a standard template format for motorcycles, but I think Royal Enfield does enough stuff different to have you think, yeah, I'm riding a Royal Enfield. This is an Indian-made bike. This is something kind of unique. And it's down to simple stuff like the switch clusters, the TFT, the kind of bold styling. I don't know, it just all comes together in a way that feels very unique, very fresh to me. All right, we'll see when this turns green if we can do a little pull away here. You're gonna road through several gears to get up to 50 or 60 miles an hour, but it's very engaging to do so. That's one of the benefits of a smaller displacement motorcycle like this that, you know, doesn't make too much power, is that you have the benefit of just kind of, you know, ripping through those gears a little bit, which a lot of people really enjoy. They find that very engaging, and they don't want to just be stuck on a super scooter that most leader bikes are, for example, or you're just kind of in first and second gear all the time. You don't have to change gears. One thing I like is the turn indicator switch. I know that's a really small thing to like, but it feels really good. It feels really tactile. I will say the joystick for the TFT does not necessarily feel very tactile. It's a little complicated, it's a little wiggly to use, and I find that it's just a bit, it's either over eager or under eager depending on how you're looking at it, and I just find it a little hard to use. So I kind of dialed in my settings here and called it a day. I inverted the TFT and I set it to, I think, performance mode, which is kind of hilarious on a motorcycle that makes like 40 horsepower. I feel like it should just be in performance mode at all times, because the other mode is eco mode, and you're not going to want to put this thing in eco mode, trust me. You need all the power you can get. Royal Enfield's done a really nice job of the fueling on this motorcycle. When I rode the Himalayan, actually in the Himalayas, I think maybe because we were at altitude and maybe just because the motorcycle was still kind of fresh, this bike has received revised mapping over the Himalayan, even though it shares the exact same engine architecture, and I find it really nice, really crisp. Slightly different gearing at the rear too. You have a 45 tooth sprocket versus a 47 on the Himalayan, and so I just feel like that in combination with the ride-by-wire system makes this bike feel really nice and just capable. As we go up the hill here, you can easily pass commuter level traffic. Mirrors are kind of buzzing like crazy once you get up above 6,000 RPM, kind of become a little useless. You guys can probably tell, you can see that there. That's kind of ridiculous. So the combination of low power, pretty strong braking performance and high amounts of engine braking from that single cylinder means that you can kind of ride this in a super chill way. It doesn't require you to be in any specific gear. You don't have to be high in the RPMs, you don't have to be low in the RPMs. It's an extremely flexible package, and that again is down to the fact that it's born out of an ADV bike. And so I'm revving it out here a little bit just to show you guys, but really I'll go ahead and click it up into fourth, and I got plenty of torque to navigate these corners. I can rev it out a little bit and watch. I'll get on the brakes here and I'll keep it in fourth gear. Normally I'd downshift, but ooh, I got a juicy amount of torque there because I'm right in the meat of that power. 5,000 RPM, you pick up the throttle. Just feels really nice and juicy, nice and easy to ride, you know? So let's talk a little bit about the scrambler aesthetics, the flat tracky tires. You know, with this bike's ground clearance and the fact that it really doesn't have much off-roady chops, this is a styling exercise more than anything. It really does remind me a lot of the Ducati Scrambler, and that's either very high praise or very low praise depending on where you're coming from. But this is a motorcycle that I think has quite a bit of you know, commonalities with the Ducati Scrambler. It's sized roughly the same, the wheelbase is roughly the same, and the flat trackery style, scramblery thing. You know, it's a bike that, you know, you don't really want to take off-road, but it has that kind of like more rugged aesthetic, let's say, the kind of off the beaten path sort of thing. Boy, it really kind of raps really nice low down in the revs. It kind of feels like a dirt bike. This bike feels really nice and sophisticated and composed over rocky, bumpy terrain. And this is something I talk about where every manufacturer kind of imbues their, let's call it mechanical terroir, their kind of like ethos of making motorcycles into every bike that they make. You know, the example I give is BMW pretty much always makes touring bikes, so even their non-touring bikes are kind of like touring bikes, you know. But for example, you know, this motorcycle, it's born and raised in India, and Indian roads are really bad. I've ridden in India, so I can say that. And so, you know, a bike like this with its slightly beefier suspension, beefier frame, it handles American style potholes and bad road conditions pretty well. It actually does a pretty good job down a bumpier, crappier road, over speed bumps. This bike represents such an interesting blend for an entry-level rider or even an experienced rider coming back into it, or someone trying to add a motorcycle to their stable. And that's ultimately what I really love to see in bikes, is that flexibility, that capability, the idea that you shouldn't just have, you know, one bike do everything, but you could add a bike to your stable, and if it's flexible enough for a wide variety of people, it means it's a very good motorcycle, you know. Some bikes are really specialized, and that's what makes them great, you know, your Yamaha R6s, your, I don't know, your sort of dirt bikes of the world, KTM products, very specialized, but at the end of the day, something like a jack of all trades like this, is really satisfying to use. There's a lot more to talk about here, so let's go back into the studio and look through the specs, the design, and the specific things about this bike that kind of make it unique.
Royal Enfield describes this as a bike built for the urban jungle, the back roads, and anyone who's not great at following directions. Sounds a bit goofy, but it is a rather straightforward and honest description for this bike. Royal Enfield has more of a claim to fame than other manufacturers for authentic retro bikes built in the modern era. Now what's nice is that despite the retro vibes, this is a thoroughly modern package with a 3-year unlimited mile warranty. Sweet. As I mentioned in the vlog, this bike is derived from the Himalayan 450, but it's received a kind of like Franken bike transformation. You start out with the same tubular steel frame where the engine is a stressed member, but then if you were to simply throw 17s front and rear, you'd be left with a really crazy geometry and a very slow steering bike. So Royal Enfield steepened up the rake to a rather astonishing 21.8 degrees from the original 26.5 degrees found in the Himalayan. Now to give you some context, a Yamaha R6 has a 24 degree rake. So how the hell does that work? Well, the bike has a rather long 56.7-inch wheelbase, and for context, a Speed 400 has a 54.2-inch wheelbase, and a Duke 390 has a 53.4-inch wheelbase. That might not sound like a huge difference, but this means this bike behaves very differently over the competition. When it comes to motorcycle geometry, tiny changes make a big difference. It's less of a little flickable beginner bike and more of a substantial and large machine. Other changes includes removing the Himalayan's long travel upside down fork for this right side up standard unit from Showa that is non-adjustable and has these gaiters on it. To be honest, I really could have done without the gaiters. So you're left with a motorcycle that started life as an ADV but's now been chopped up from the factory to work. So, word to the wise, you can't just throw 17s on your adventure bike and expect a supermoto. Another added benefit of this ADV derivation is that this is a sturdy, solid machine. It really feels beefy, down to the controls, all the way to the chassis. It feels like it can take a beating. And I suppose being that it was designed for Indian roads, I don't doubt it. With the lower center of gravity, the slightly increased suspension travel over the competition, and the longer wheelbase, and you've got a recipe for a stable, sure-footed motorcycle that can tackle nearly anything on road. I think Royal Enfield made a smart move with the tire size on this bike. It's got a 120/70/17 up front and a 160/60/17 out back, which are standard sizes. But what isn't standard is that sizing for this particular category. Typically 400 or 500cc bikes would have a 110 up front and maybe a 150 out back at most. But this plus-sized setup that the Guerrilla 450 have gives it that more big bike feel when parked, but it also has the added benefit of soaking up more of the road too. It's sort of like when you swap in larger diameter tires on a bicycle and you get that nice supple feeling. And since this is a thoroughly modern bike, you also get a tubeless wheel and tire setup, which is great for road riding. It means you can just plug a flat and keep going. And in this particular size, you can get Pirelli Rosso 4s or a Michelin Pilot Road 6. And I think the Pilot Road 6 would be a superior option over these seat flat tracker style tires and would be more real world appropriate. It's got better grip and it's a higher quality rubber. I personally really enjoy the full-sized nature of this bike. It doesn't suffer from the same problem as the Speed 400 where it's kind of pint-sized. That's yet another benefit from starting from an adventure bike. Now in this motorcycle, you've got a 30.7-inch seat height and roughly 406 pounds ready to ride. That means it's a little bit heavier than the competition, but again, it gives it that more big bike feel. Royal Enfield also shaped the tank to be narrower at the seat junction, which gives it a lower standover height and is quite easy to reach the ground. I'm about 5'11" with a 32-inch inseam, and I found it very comfortable to ride, but your results may vary. This 452cc Sherpa motor is a sweetheart of an engine with loads of character, torque down low, and a pretty addictive brap. It makes 40 horsepower at 8,000 RPM and 30 foot-pounds of torque at 5,500 RPM, but that doesn't really tell the whole story because Royal Enfield actually tuned this to have 85% of the torque at about 3,000 RPM. Despite being an over-square engine with an 84mm bore and an 81.5mm stroke, you kind of want to keep this bike down low and just grab more handfuls of throttle. Again, kind of sounds like an adventure bike. The original Himalayan 411 used the OG long stroke engine, which measured 78mm and 86mm for bore and stroke respectively, but it was an air-cooled 2-valve per cylinder mill and simply too agricultural for modern riding, in my opinion, despite what the evangelists might tell you. Yes, it was more pure, it was more authentic, but it simply wouldn't work as a flexible modular platform in the modern era. Longer strokes mean way more vibrations at high revs, lower rev ceilings, and without a wider bore, you literally can't fit more valves inside the combustion chamber. So now what you get is a pretty sophisticated and smooth experience out of this new Sherpa motor. And I like it quite a bit. It's one of my favorite singles on the market. And that plus size 452cc's of displacement makes it feel good. The happy spot for freeways seems to be about 65 to 75 miles per hour, minimal vibes, and it chugs along very nicely. Any faster than that and you kind of start to feel the vibrations and the buzziness. But you're not going to be going super long distances with the Guerrilla because it has a 2.9 gallon tank with a realistic range of about 120 to 130 miles to a tank. Now, that's a bit smaller than the competition, but if you want this with range, you're probably gonna get the Himalayan 450. A fun party trick the display can do is actually casting Google Maps from your phone straight to the TFT. There's a Wi-Fi chipset inside that lets you stream, but be warned, it's gonna drain the hell out of your battery. But there is a USB port that you can connect to right there on the dash, so that's pretty thoughtful. Here's a few more fun facts about the bike. It doesn't have a tail light. It actually uses the turn indicator blades as the light. I didn't think the DOT would let you get away with that here in the States, but I guess crime is legal now in the USA, so who the hell knows? You also get a slip and assist clutch, which is nice when you're banging down gears, and it even has a center stand. That's how you know this is an Indian bike. I kind of wish we could opt in a sorry guard, but maybe you can, who knows? All right, I'm gonna wrap up my final thoughts on this motorcycle. In my opinion, Royal Enfield has emerged in the 2020s as a true enthusiast's brand. And this largely comes down to the philosophy of the leadership team, specifically the CEO Siddhartha Lal, or Sid for short. I've met and chatted with him in the Himalayas, and it is such a stark contrast when leadership actually rides and understands motorcycles, as opposed to, say, Harley Davidson, who installed a CEO who comes from Pizza Hut or something like that. It sounds like a cliche, but when the top brass loves bikes and understands why people want to ride it, and they ride the bikes themselves, it really comes through in the products. Royal Enfield has transformed as a company, and this second product with their Sherpa engine has bucked so many trends. In a world where we get quarterly profit goals, short-term thinking, short squeeze product cycles, companies just throwing spaghetti at the wall while simultaneously telling consumers that the hopeful vision we have for the future isn't possible and we should just get used to eating slop. Well, Royal Enfield is a complete breath of fresh air. Long-term strategic thinking, value-driven, not falling victim to the trappings of late-stage capitalism or gimmicks. These are honest, good, solid bikes built well at an affordable price by a company that is reputable. What's not to like? You get everything you need to roadster and nothing you don't. It's an exercise in restraint in 2026. Excellent design choices, and hey, comes in some pretty cool colors. Royal Enfield gives me hope for the motorcycle industry. We need a lot more of this. They've taken their time, they've rebuilt their manufacturing facilities, and I'm very interested to see how they will tackle the future. We're building an entirely new lane of motorcycling. No longer are beginners forced to go and get a used Japanese 250 to start riding. You have options now. You can get quality Indian-made bikes, maybe even Chinese bikes that rival the options that you can get from Japan. And hell, there's even Euro brands that leverage Indian manufacturing to create entry-level options now too, kind of like Triumph and Aprilia. And quite frankly, the Japanese beginner bikes have mostly been built in Thailand for many, many years now anyways. I think it's an extremely exciting time to be a beginner rider, and I've been saying that for years. The current generation is completely spoiled for choices in this segment. But the party trick that the Guerrilla 450 plays is that because it's derived from an ADV, it can serve way more than just a beginner rider. This is just a great bike, period. It's large and mature enough where riders from a vast array of experience levels can find enjoyment and/or utility from it. Now, one interesting idea from this bike is the fact that it was an adventure bike first, then a road bike. It kind of begs the question, are we going to see manufacturers follow suit and develop adventure bikes first, which can then be transformed into road bikes? There's certainly benefits to this approach. I've often personally found that when you take an off-road capable bike on-road, it works way better than taking an on-road capable bike off-road. The design brief seems to flow better in the dirt to street direction. Think of a supermoto, for example. Those seem to work pretty damn well. So the elephant in the room is that this is a huge departure for Royal Enfield, and many wondered if they could actually pull it off. There are those in motorcycling nowadays who love to say something like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Now, these conservative Luddites would prefer to live in a world where companies dream small and try less, just so things don't change and they get to cravenly purchase cheaper motorcycles. Some Royal Enfield enthusiasts and supporters have fallen victim to this mindset. To put it bluntly, I think that philosophy is bullshit. Had Royal Enfield never changed, had they stayed the same or changed nothing in the pursuit of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, then we wouldn't be sitting right here pointing to one of the very best beginner bikes on the market. Hell, it's not even a beginner bike, I'm tired of saying that. It's just a good bike. Royal Enfield could have just kept making the 411 motor. It was charming, it was simple. Come on, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But I'm glad we still have some dreamers, some high achievers, some people who still strive for excellence. Nothing stays the same forever. Hell, even my own videos have evolved, changed, adapted over time. Because if we keep that myopic attitude, desperately clinging to the past, hoping that our framework for the world continues to serve us, even though things are rapidly changing before our eyes, hell, we have a liquid-cooled Royal Enfield sitting right here, then you're just gonna get left in the dust. This is a fine effort from Royal Enfield, and there's very little that I can fault this motorcycle for. It looks great, works well, does what it's supposed to, has charm and X factor in ways that you might expect, and it doesn't cost a whole lot of money. This is an awesome bike. I'm gonna rate it a 9.3 out of 10. Thanks for checking out this one all the way to the end. I would be remiss if I didn't remind you that this is a giveaway bike and you have just 3 days to get entered to win. So it's just today, tomorrow, and the next day. That's it. I didn't want to drag this one out. I wanted to do something fun for this riding season. So head over to the website, get your chances locked and loaded to win this bike and $1,200 cash. I wanted to do something where, you know, you could get your beginner rider kit, pay for your MSF, do some fun stuff, have a little bit left over for gas. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.